I asked my dad to pray for me that I would accept Jesus into my life. So I tried living without God, and I tried living with God. And I can definitely tell you that every time I have tried living with God, my life has been 1,000 times better. But ultimately what I've discovered is that God's love, it never fails. So, I'm Reece, I'm 21, and I'm from Bradford in Yorkshire, and I'm going to give my testimony and explain a little bit about my life for you guys. So, as I said, I'm from Bradford. I was raised by my mum and dad. I have two sisters, Lily and Faith, and I have been going to church since I was about 3 years old. And within that kind of time, from being 3 to now, I've experienced a lot, I've seen a lot, I've definitely felt a lot, but I've also seen God move in massive ways throughout my life, throughout other people's lives. So yeah, I hope this story inspires you a little bit. Yeah, so as I've said, I grew up as a Christian. When I was about 6 years old, laid in bed, I asked my dad to pray for me that I would accept Jesus into my life, and I did. And then from being 6 to, well, being 17, my life was pretty standard. I went through school, so I went through primary school, I went through high school as a Christian, I went through years 7 to 10 as a Christian. And then in year 11 things started to change just a little bit as kind of I started maturing. I started being more interested in sport, in hanging out with my friends and girls. So for that time, God really took a bit of a back step. From that, I joined the school football team. I started going to more parties with my friends, and I started trying to date more girls. And that kind of went from year 11 to year 12, so I went into sixth form. And I failed my first year of sixth form. I got 3 U's in my exams, which isn't good. And my mum and dad told me to kind of buckle down and do my best if I wanted to retake a year. So I decided to retake a year, and within that kind of second year of being in sixth form, I discovered from my dad one February morning that my mum had been diagnosed with cancer. Now for me at the time, as I was saying, I was starting to get my life back on track a little bit. I started going to church, I started kind of praying a little bit more, reading my Bible and all that kind of thing. But when my mum was diagnosed, it hit me really hard. I guess I'd just been through life not really experiencing anything big or major, and then when it was kind of discovered that she had cancer, that was massive, that was ridiculously big for me. And from February onwards, I started trying to live life my own way. So again, I started going out to parties with my friends, but I started getting drunk more. I became quite heavily reliant on drinking. Drinking kind of filled the void of loneliness and emptiness that I'd felt through my mum kind of going through radio and chemotherapy in order to kind of cure this cancer and to stop this cancer being so aggressive. But through that, it just became this constant cycle of waking up, going to school, going to my friends, getting drunk, going home, waking up, going to school, etc. And that went on for about 3 or 4 months, and it took me a while to really figure out what was actually wrong. And what I kind of discovered was that my selfishness was really getting in the way of my life. So I put God on the back burner, and I started putting drink and drugs and girls above him. And then one Sunday morning on May the 25th, 2013, I woke up covered in my own sick after a night of drinking. And it was on that day that I realised that something had to change. So through that change, I started trying to make more positive decisions with my life. I started going to church more. I started talking to people about how I was feeling more. But ultimately, I gave my life back to God. So I tried living without God, and I tried living with God. And I can definitely tell you that every time I have tried living with God, my life has been 1,000 times better than without. But in the August of 2013, I was accepted onto a gap year where I'll be drumming for a band called Taste, who were based in Essex. And this church that we're filming in right now became my base church. And throughout the year, as I toured with these guys, going into schools and doing music lessons, talking about God, I really discovered that I had a passion for God, and the passion that I'd lacked so much in the last or previous 2 years had started to come back. And as the year went on, we did schools work, we did youth work, we did youth cafes, school clubs, we did concerts in Germany, we did all sorts. But then when it came to the end of the year, I decided to move back to Bradford to be with my family. By this time, my mum had had surgery, so it kind of meant that the cancer had been removed, or what the doctors thought the cancer had been removed. But then I went back in the August of 2014, and by the October of 2014 the cancer had come back, but rather than just being in one place, it had spread all over her body. And while she was in hospital, the doctors gave her a 6 months chance, or a 6 month time span of living. So within that kind of October to Christmas, we tried as a family to make sure that everything we did revolved around Mum, but ultimately revolved around God, because even through her illness, my mum was still trying to point me and point my family to God. And then we had Christmas, obviously in December 2014, and that was absolutely awesome. But then on January the 5th of last year, Mum passed away on a Monday morning, and at that time it had kind of gone from me being really good with God to having a really testing time with God again. I tried drinking, I tried doing the same things that I'd done before, but nothing, it just didn't have the same effect on me, it didn't interest me anymore. So going back to church was a thing that I tried to do, and the funny thing is, Christians have a real tendency of trying to say that God's timing is perfect and that everything happens for a reason. And when you're going through a time of grief and when you're going through a time of despair, it just doesn't work like that. You're allowed to grieve, you're allowed to feel desperate, you're allowed to feel depressed if you feel depressed. It's not weird, you're not a freak. And throughout that time I really discovered a lot about myself, that I had a tendency to switch off from people. I had a tendency to become quite arrogant and ignorant to people. But ultimately, I started looking more for God in these situations rather than myself. So yeah, from then until now, it's been like a ridiculous journey. It's just been a journey of like self-awareness, of trying to discover who I've been, who I was and who I have been. But ultimately what I've discovered is that God's love, it never fails. And if you trust in God, He can do bigger things through you than you can through a bottle of alcohol, or through a joint, or through a cigarette, or through anything that isn't Him. I think if anybody's kind of going through any similar experience that I've been through, I think probably one of the best things to do is just realise that life doesn't always go how you want it to go. When you kind of live in a perfect world and something bad happens, it kind of helps or makes you realise that life isn't as perfect as you thought it was. But Jesus does say that following Him wouldn't be easy, and through my life, through the past 4 or 5 years, I can definitely agree with that. But if you are going through something that is quite similar to mine, or it's something about your identity, or it's something about self-harm, or it's something about alcohol abuse or drug abuse or whatever, the kind of thing that I would say is talk to somebody about it. Don't hold it in, don't try and do it by yourself, because the more you try and do it by yourself, the weaker you become. But when you've got people around you who want to support you, who want to help you, it makes everything just a little bit easier. And never forget that there is a God in heaven who desperately wants a friendship with you, desperately wants that relationship with you, to connect with you on a level that you've never experienced before. So don't give up hope, don't give up just because times are tough. Just remember that when you get through the tough time, you'll be able to look back on it and give somebody else a little bit of advice on how you dealt with it and how they can deal with it.